Hey friends, before we get going with today's episode, I want to talk about my other job as a church leader for a moment. Look, we've all worked really hard this past year and burnout is real. That's why I'm excited that my friend Chris at Delmar has released a new program called Rethinking Evangelism. Now, you probably don't know my friend Chris, but he has been a marketing master for 15 years. Now he wants to help churches learn the same digital skills he has been teaching companies that whole time. Rethinking Evangelism is a revolutionary program that will give your church the tools and training you need to finally enter the 21st century. I'm talking about running digital ads to let people know, I don't know, that your church exists, or building an email list to stay connected with the people who do visit you. You'll learn how these tools can help your church grow. And hey, if the pandemic taught us anything, it's that digital skills are life skills for churches. If you'd like to get the ball rolling and have a conversation about how your church can learn these new skills and join Rethinking Evangelism, then just go visit rethinkingevangelism.co today. That's rethinkingevangelism.co. All right, welcome everybody to a special bonus episode, I guess, of the Adventist History Podcast. We're still calling them bonus episodes. We're still doing that. This is the month of July, so welcome. I am with Abigail Follows. Abigail recently wrote a book that we will get to in just a moment, but more importantly, she is a missionary somewhere in the world right now. Now, I should let people know that Abigail is not your real name, so there's no point trying to look her up on Facebook, okay, people? I know how you operate because I'm kind of the same way. Anyways, Abigail reached out a little over a month ago, and I thought it was a great idea for us to chat because we have recently been sharing a bunch of missionary stories in this golden age of Adventist missions in the beginning of the 20th century. And since Abigail's a missionary, a real live missionary, well, thought it'd be fun to chat with her, and you guys can hear a little bit about what being a missionary is all about. So, Abigail, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Here's my first question. The question I'm sure a bunch of people are wondering right now. How in the world did you find the Adventist History Podcast?
Yeah, so we were looking for something that we could listen to when we, after we do kind of our little house church. It's just the four of us, my husband and two kids on Sabbath mornings. And we have a little Sabbath school for the kids. We watch a sermon. And my husband was looking for something we could listen to in the car on the way to go out into the hills for a little hike. And he stumbled across your podcast. I'm not exactly sure how. But we're really glad that we did because that's like a highlight. Like, as soon as we get in the car after church, the kids are like, Adventist History Podcast. And so we turn it on, and it's really neat to see how they're really connecting with the different eras, I guess, of Adventist history. They'll ask, when I tell them things about modern history, they'll ask me, is that before Ellen White or after Ellen White? They want to know how it fits into the scheme of things. So we've really enjoyed the podcast.
Sure. Yeah, I think you wrote in the email that we can divide Adventist history like before Ellen White, like BEW, and then after Ellen White is
Right.
Yes, it's a new way of organizing all of history around Ellen White.
Right.
I mean, there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that. Adventism. Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. She would love me. Anyways, here's what I want to ask you. I think a lot of us imagine missionaries, people who have never really been on mission trips for any length of time. I think we imagine missionaries as people who are living in the jungle, who collect rainwater on leaves, and they're building houses out of sticks. Is that really how things are?
Well, actually, I know some missionaries who would rather have it that way, to be totally honest. The world they're becoming more and more, people are becoming concentrated into cities, and that's really where the people are. So I actually know a lot of missionaries who are living in large cities and would much rather be out there in the jungle, kind of in nature, but instead they look out their window and they see factories. But it varies. There are still definitely people, out in Papua New Guinea who are working with, tribes who who wear a banana leaf and that's all they wear. But it just varies so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So we gotta kind of update our impression of missionaries. Basically, you guys are specialists who blend in, right? Do you kind of wear your New York Yankees hat everywhere you go, or how do you kind of fit in with the culture?
Well, obviously, I mean, we look like Westerners, so everybody knows. But we do our best to kind of, what would you say? What's the word?
Assimilate, maybe?
We do our best to incarnate like Christ, really. We try to get to know how people dress,
Okay.
how they talk, how they eat. I remember in India, we never had a couch. We sat on the floor. We didn't have a kitchen table until, my kids were 5 and 7, because it was just more comfortable for other people to come in our home and sit on the floor with us and eat on the floor with us. I wore Indian clothes, and people loved that. That really helped people to feel connected to us. And it also, we've dealt with, there's a bit of an image issue with Westerners in many other countries. They think that Westerners are what they've seen on TV, that Westerners are Hollywood. And so there's this kind of assumption in a lot of places that Westerners are going to be immoral kind of people. And so dressing, especially for women, dressing the way that very upstanding women in that culture dress, it just helps to label you, I guess, in their eyes as a good person.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I do want to get to the book because there's a question I have along these lines. So I'm just going to put a pin in this right now and just ask one more question, because I think people have probably picked up on this by now. But you're not there on a 2-week mission trip.
Right.
You're there. How long have you been a missionary? And how long do you typically stay in one location?
We've been missionaries for 11 years. We were in our first country of service for 7. And really, it varies a lot depending on what organization you go out with, but we're considered career missionaries, which means we're not just doing this for a year or two. It's not like we just go and we would just want to kind of tour around. We actually we're immigrants. We've come here and we've set up roots here, and we're trying to form relationships in the community so that we can share Christ in a way that's really relevant for them.
All right, we're having some spotty audio right there. Abigail warned me that we might lose some connection, so I'm just letting our listeners know if that sounds like she's jumping in or out. It's because it's probably a little bit spotty where she is, and that's okay. There you go. It doesn't really help. I was told by the Adventist CIA that I'm not allowed to identify what organization you're with, so we're not going to do that. But
That's
as
great.
you've indicated, you've been a missionary for 11 years. This is a career choice, not just a kind of a gap year. It's not a gap year that you
Right.
that you guys are on. You were married before you went into the mission field, but I understand both your children were born in the mission field. Is that true?
Yeah, so my daughter was actually born right around a year after we got to India. So you can imagine that was very exciting. We were fairly newlyweds, and we had a new baby, and it was new culture, new language, new everything. So it was very exciting. And then my second child was born just a couple of years later.
Your book is called Hidden Song of the Himalayas. Let me just get that out there so people know what it's called. It chronicles your first 7 years as a missionary in India. And let me just say, reading through those first chapters, the word I have to describe how I felt is terrifying. Because the idea, I'm not a woman, okay? I've never obviously been pregnant, but like the idea of having to learn a language and navigate a culture and find a place for my first child to be born has got to be one of the most terrifying, out of my comfort zone experiences that I could possibly imagine.
Yeah,
And you did
pretty
it.
much
You
I pretty
did
much
it.
left my comfort zone, behind completely. But there was a little bit of naivete, I guess, that helped a little bit. Like, I really didn't know all the things that could have gone wrong, and the Lord protected me. You know, there was my second child. I could have died during childbirth. There was a very dramatic event. I could have died, but God protected me and protected my kids. So yes, it was definitely an adventure. Some people ask me like, "Wow, how did you do that? You're so brave." And I just say, "No, I'm not really brave, but you know, if you just obey God and move forward one step at a time, it can kind of have that appearance, but really all the credit goes to him, you know, because he's the one empowering and enabling."
Yeah. Yeah. I can see, I think, a little bit about where you're coming from, not just with the faith aspect of it, but just also when you're there. Well, let me back up and just say, I think when you're outside of that situation, thinking about it, it can be more terrifying than just being there, being like, look, I'm here. I don't have a choice. There's no point curling up in a ball in my room. And, you know, I got to figure this out. Right. You had somebody from your mission organization who was there, who took you to, you know, said, hey, let's go look at the delivery room at the hospital. Right. So you had somebody who was like, hey, we got to just go forward here. There's no time to just sit and say, gee, poor me. Like, you got to move forward. Right. So maybe it's definitely terrifying, I think, either way, but it probably is more terrifying when you're on the outside just thinking about it all, and you're not there, where the task is just to put one foot in front of the other and move forward.
Well, I definitely had many, many moments curled up in a ball, talking to God about how I felt, you know, I mean, telling God, are you really sure? This doesn't seem like a good idea. You know, we have mold in our house. Didn't you say something about that in the Old Testament? I don't know. That doesn't seem to be really in your will, you know, but yeah, certainly you have to kind of pick yourself up and say, no, I didn't come all the way here just to not do something. So I have to keep moving forward, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to read a little section here from the book about some of the first things you saw when you arrived. Namely these shops. You write this. The shops seemed to cater to a specific kind of tourist. There were tattoo parlors, shops selling Buddhist prayer bowls, markets lined with giant paintings of Bob Marley's face or black and white elephants. There were exotic musical instrument shops with broken sitars, innumerable holes in the wall selling, in quotes, pizza and snakes. And I'm going to ask you about that in just a second.
Okay.
But then you said somebody walked up to your husband and said, I got hashish. You want some? And your husband, Joshua, says, nah. I love that that's his response. It's not like, no, man. It's like, just nah. Like, right. Wow, what an immersion into a culture. Like, good grief.
Yeah, that was our first day up in our target area. So that was, it was information, and it was sensory overload. Just so many colors and sounds and smells and people. It was amazing.
Yeah. Okay, the pizza and snakes. I have to ask, what's that all about?
Okay, it's just a misspelling. So there were not snakes for sale to eat. It was just a misspelling, but we thought it was really funny, so I had to put it in there.
Yeah. Okay. Was it supposed to be like snacks or what?
Yeah, snacks.
Oh, okay. Snacks or shakes? That was my guess.
Okay, right.
That is an awesome misspelling.
Yeah, we thought so.
That is a pizza and snakes. I mean, you know, it's plausible, I guess, somewhere that when they might do something like that.
Yeah, you never know.
Anyways, right. So you're in this just intense immersion into this Indian culture, and you mentioned the smells, the food, the dress, the religion, like all of this stuff. You just get thrown in. Is that normal for a missionary? I mean, you mentioned in the book that you spent some time before you went studying the culture from a distance, obviously. Did that help prepare you for this?
Wow. Did it help prepare us? Well, certainly we did 3 months of training, which helped immensely. And we were researching the people group online as much as we possibly could. But the fact is, there just wasn't anybody out there. There wasn't someone there to say, here's how it is, prepare yourselves. You know, there were, we knew we knew at the time when we went of no other foreign missionaries within like a 5-hour radius of where we lived. That's not just Adventist. That's any denomination. We knew the nearest Adventist church was 4 hours away. And we knew that there was a small church about 20 minutes drive from where we ended up setting up shop. But we really didn't know about anything else. We ended up meeting a couple of missionaries. But it was really just such an unreached place. Somebody had to go there and figure it out on their own. Somebody had to be the one to go and look around and figure out what was needed.
Mm. Did you choose this location, or did your mission organization choose it for you?
We had several suggestions from our organization of different places that we might go. They felt like, okay, this one is a good fit for your personalities and the way you guys are. You know, they did all kinds of tests on us. They did, psychological evaluations. They did personality testing on us, and they just wanted to try to figure out what was a good fit for who we are. And they had another project that had other missionaries already there. And they said, we think you guys would get along well. It's not a new project, so it's not going to be so much new stuff. You're going to go into it knowing more. But we actually chose and preferred to go to a project that was new because we wanted to feel invested from the very beginning. We wanted to be the ones that got to know this people and wrestled with how to reach them for Jesus.
You might say then that the typical recommended course is to put new missionaries maybe with a more established place, right, to get their feet wet, not to just total immersion. It's baptism by sprinkling, not by immersion, right? That's
for sure. In fact, I had a couple of older missionaries with other organizations or other denominations read the book, and they said, "Oh, you guys should not have been out there by yourselves," But and I just said, in an ideal world, yeah, we would go somewhere with other people, but this is a people that has no one to tell them. If we really believe that Jesus is coming soon and that it's our responsibility to tell people who he is, then in our minds, at that time, we felt like we can't wait for that. Somebody has to go. And there wasn't anybody ready to go there. There was not an older, more experienced missionary able, ready, willing to go there. So, but yes, it's definitely, normally they put new, fresh missionaries with a team.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because one of the things we talked about when we discussed missionaries in this podcast is how dangerous it was. Somewhere between 8 and 12% of missionaries suffered some kind of loss of life, whether it's their children being born or they themselves, the parents. Is it still that way?
Yeah, I mean, in the earliest 20th century, there were missionaries who were packing their bags into their own coffins, kind of assuming that something probably is going to happen, whether it's medical or being attacked. I've never had to pack in a coffin. I don't know anybody who has. But the risks have just changed. We have medicine now for things like dysentery, for intestinal worms, for these kind of things that you can pick up in certain countries. And we know a lot more about healing and about health, but there are just really different challenges now. There's war, there's terrorism, there's pollution. We know a family, the dad used to actually sit, this was during the crisis in Rwanda, and they were missionaries there, and the dad used to sit with his kids and play Monopoly with them on the floor under the windows so they wouldn't stand up and be a target. And that's not that long ago. We know missionaries who've gotten cancer or other strange illnesses because of drinking water that had, chemicals or heavy metals in it. There are still risks. They look different though. But it definitely is something we say you have to count the cost. You just have to realize, okay, I'm not going to be in America anymore. And some places you'll go and they're nicer as far as sanitation and organization. Some places aren't. Some places are more difficult. We have to count the cost, but I would say it's not as high a cost. When I counted the cost, I wasn't counting the cost of my own coffin, so it's definitely different.
Yeah. There's certainly, I think, a cost in other ways. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, I mentioned that Abigail's not your real name.
Mm-hmm.
You actually have, I think, several names that are not your real name. Do you
Right.
do you find that it's difficult in terms of like when you live under different names for your own safety and so forth? Is it hard? Like, because you had a whole life, you had a whole identity under your birth name, and now you're going by another name and you're in a different context. Is that really just kind of like emotionally jarring, or
It's
does
a
it
little
feel
hard
like
to keep track of. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, the CIA or somebody could easily hire you because you're ready to go. We joke about this. We joke about the Adventist
Right.
CIA, but and I only do that just for our listeners to understand. The Adventist Church does not actually have an intelligence organization, okay? But we joke about that because it feels like some of the same skills that spies use are skills that missionaries have to use. Not that you're trying to do anyone any harm or steal anything or anything like that, but you know that kind of incarnational part.
Yeah, there are countries that really don't want missionaries. They're actively trying to keep them out. We go by our real names in the field, and we use pen names when we're writing online. So if somebody's going to get online and do a Google search, at customs, when we're entering a country, that they're not going to find anything.
Yeah.
So that's the reason for that. It's just to give us and the people that may come to Christ because of what we say and do, to give them a little extra protection as well.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. A friend of mine who was a missionary in Indonesia for a number of years, he's since left that place, but he said there were times where he would have to go to court with some people that he had been studying with, who they were brought up on charges of being a Christian, and they had to find a way around that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not just about your safety and well-being. It's also about the people that you are working with and befriending and things like that as well. In some places, sure,
For
sure. You mentioned in the book the challenge of having to tell your parents and presumably other loved ones, "Hey, I'm going to go become a missionary for I don't know how long, but for a while." I know everybody has a different kind of parental situation. Some people have Christian parents who'd say, "Hey, yeah, great, good for you." But I imagine that's still got to be really hard, no matter how your parents take this, right? Because they're going to give up on being able to, call you anytime they want or come over and visit. Was that a hard conversation for you and your husband to have with your respective parents?
It was actually harder when we took our second call to come to this, the place we are now, because I think that they kind of felt like, okay, you did that now, now you can be home with us. And so really, I would say that parents of missionaries are like the unsung heroes. They actually sacrifice so much more in terms of peace of mind and relationships, and so we really make an effort to make sure that our parents are close with our kids. We try to do, and nowadays technology just helps so much because we can do video calls when the internet, cooperates. We just feel much more connected. We can see them more often. They can come here. We can go there occasionally. So, but definitely they are the unsung heroes of missions. It's the parents.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Something I never really considered before. How hard it is on them as well. And, I guess in friends and the rest of family as well, who they don't get to see you as much as I'm sure they would love to. I want to go back to something we started with, which was about the incarnational nature of being a missionary in terms of how you connect with the culture, because undoubtedly you say you want to dress as people do around you. But there are lines to that assimilation. There's lines you won't cross. Some of these, I imagine, are up to individual missionaries because they may be gray areas, but others maybe not. I mean, you're right about this one experience of being invited to dinner, and you arrive at this big tent, and basically there's a people in the middle with a small wooden box with some. You said it looked like something I imagined the biblical Ark of the Covenant looked, which of course makes me think of Indiana Jones. But you said this box was covered in faces cast in silver with their eyes closed, and that this was there was a demigod spirit inside. That's what people thought was in there, and somebody was possessed.
That was
holy
crazy.
cow!
Yeah.
Holy cow! I mean, it's not really what you expect to happen when someone invites you to dinner.
Yeah, for sure.
You're
Dinner
just
with a
thinking
demon.
restaurant or someone's house or dinner with a demon. There you go.
Yeah.
How are there some kind of principles you've worked out in terms of where you draw certain lines? Like, I mean, maybe food offered to idols is maybe a little bit clearer issue to some people than others, but certainly in terms of like maybe the more subtle elements of dress, like you mentioned at one point, I don't remember what it's called, but there was like some Christians wouldn't wear that red strand through their hair. Is that what that was?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So how do you draw the line on some of these things?
That is a question that we asked of ourselves every single day. And actually, we asked it more for the sake of those coming to Christ than for our own sake. Because for us, I mean, they just appreciated, at least in India, they just appreciated any effort we made to appreciate their culture, to assimilate into their culture. They just loved it, So all you have to say is namaste, and people are like, "Oh, you speak such good Hindi," They were just so encouraging and sweet and kind. So for me, I didn't feel too much pressure throughout our time there. Occasionally, but really, we asked that question for the sake of other people, because we had a lady come to Christ she was a high caste lady who had grown up worshiping idols. She'd heard about Jesus from actually a chain-smoking Catholic lady in the mountains that she just happened to meet. And this lady told her some story she remembered about Jesus from way back in her childhood, and she was kind of intrigued. And we ended up sharing with her. She ended up coming to Christ. And then she just ended up facing all of these things. Can I do this? Can I not do this as a Christian? And for her, especially as a woman in the culture that she was in, a lot of those decisions aren't hers to make. Those decisions belong to the males in her family, the men in her family, her husband, her husband's father. So really for her, she had to figure out a way to navigate all those things. And for us, what we did in preparing ourselves to advise is, number one, we suspended judgment on everything that was non-essential. It's like you said, it's very clear. You don't eat food offered to idols. You do not bow to an idol. That is so clear in Scripture. When things were non-essential, like some of the jewelry that they wore, or like the bindi dot on the middle of the forehead, we just waited. And we spent the time we were waiting trying to understand why. What purpose did these things serve? And then after we understood the purpose, we applied Christian principles to that. And we tried to teach other people to do that as well. I remember this same lady, Darshika, at one point she was trying to decide how to handle a certain festival. They had a festival called Karva Brat that they would do every year, where all the women fast for their husbands. They fast and pray for their husband's long life. And she thought about that, and she prayed about it, and she said, I think that sounds like a Christian thing to do, to fast and pray. I want to fast and pray to the true God, to the Creator God, for my husband. But the problem is that after the fast, I'm supposed to worship the moon. So she was supposed to pour out this kind of brass urn of water to the moon and say some words, and that was like a really important part of this ceremony. And we were actually there with her when she was doing this fast. And I remember it was dark, the moon had just come out, her mother-in-law and her sister-in-law had just poured out their water to the moon, and it was her turn. And she was literally standing there with this brass urn held above her head, looking up at the moon, trying to decide, what am I going to do? Because she knew, okay, I can fast and pray, but I can't worship the moon. That's not honoring the Creator. And what she ended up choosing to
Yeah.
do is to turn her back to the moon, actually, and she poured out the water, and she said, for my Heavenly Father, I do this for my Heavenly Father.
Wow.
So
Wow.
she was the one to figure out how to handle that. It was so beautiful to see. The Holy
Yeah.
Spirit showed her what to do, you know?
Yeah. Wow. That is a beautiful and elegant solution to that problem. That, yeah. I mean, I think you're right. You can't tell people ahead of time. We want rules, right? Like we want to just
Right.
know, do this, don't do this for every situation, and it just doesn't work. You actually have to be connected to the Holy Spirit. You're saying to know what to do in these situations.
For sure.
So you spent 7 years there. What are some things that you walked away with in life, lessons that you learned as a missionary in India, things that you will cherish, experiences that you'll cherish, things like that? Like how did it grow you as a person?
Yeah. Well, in so many ways. One is just my faith in God. I mean, that sounds kind of cliche to say that, but really he proved himself to me. And this is something that I see a lot of times in people's lives, is that God will sort of bring you to the edge. He'll bring you to the edge of your faith. And you're like, I really can't do this, God. And he asks you, well, are you going to do it anyway because I told you to? And you have a choice at that point if you're going to obey him or not. And I can testify that if you will go with him over the edge, he will catch you, and it will strengthen your faith so much, because you just realize, wait a minute, every single time that it seems like I can't do it, that it seems like we're going to die, that it seems like something terrible is going to happen, God is catching me every single time. He's faithful. I really, really cherish having been able to see someone come to Christ. This lady Darshika that I mentioned, I got to be there and watch her forgive someone for the very first time. She had a very difficult life, and anger was sort of how she protected herself, so that's how she dealt with things. She was angry and strong, and I remember seeing her decide to forgive someone, and she said, I can't, I literally cannot do this. And I said, I know, you're so right. You can't. But you can be willing, though. You can be willing to be willing. And she ended up going and not just forgiving this person, but asking forgiveness for the things she had done. And it was so beautiful because she said, the forgiveness didn't happen until I actually reached out and hugged the person. So it's such a faith thing. She was moving forward going, God, it's still not gone. I still hate them.
Yeah.
But I'm moving forward toward them.
Yeah.
So very beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the more poignant things I think I find in this book. By the way, you're an excellent writer. It was a joy to read. It moves really, really quickly. It's a blast. It's a good book.
I'm so glad you enjoyed
But one of
it.
the things that really, what really struck me here was this Mr. Pandit's son, a comment that he made. He said, "How nice that your God gives you a break each week. Our gods never let us rest."
Yeah.
That statement just hit me in the face, and I'm going to actually use it in a sermon. So by the time this episode comes out, it'll have been done. But it struck me as like, wow. I mean, that is just so, what a realization. And I think that can be said even if you're even outside of a Hindu context. I mean, like everybody has gods somewhere, and it's so true, right? Our gods never let us rest. I mean, what a beautiful realization that he came upon.
Amen.
Just wow.
We actually had several people comment that same thing, and later on, when we were kind of wrapping up our time there, I looked back and I thought, I haven't always entered that rest. I haven't always trusted him that he was going to do what he said he would do. It can be easy as a missionary when you see so much need to feel like what you do is a drop in the bucket, and you kind of pressure yourself like, I can't rest. There are still unreached people, But God says, okay, you've done enough. This 6 days was enough. Now come away and take a break. And that's really, I think it's also a bit of a parable for us that God has put in our week, every week, a little parable of, the world's not going to stop going around because you let go of all this stuff. You can rest, and I'm going to take care of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So your time in India after 7 years was coming to an end. Why did you guys leave after 7 years?
So we encountered some, over the years there, we had some rather traumatic experiences, especially our kids, which I write about in the book, I tell about in the book. And I think after 7 years there, they were just needing a break. And we kind of thought, okay, well, we know from experience that God can fix this and he can heal them. They were getting anxious, and they were really, really stressed, showing signs of like a lot of stress. And we prayed about it. We said, Lord, we're willing to stay. And we actually asked God, can you give us some kind of sign to show us what we're supposed to do? Because at this point, we don't want to just decide on our own. You called us here, you need to call us out. And he gave us a very clear sign. And even after that sign, it was pretty amazing, because we prayed and we said, Lord, we have some people that are following you now. We have a house church. We've rented this house. We paid a year of rent. We fixed it up. Why are you calling us out now? What are we supposed to do? And we prayed that God would just show us what to do with those things. And 2 hours later, we got a phone call from the union in Delhi saying, we have 2 guys who've been fasting and praying. They want to come to your village. Indian guys, and they just need a house. They have a stipend. And we said, well, God's already provided a house, so come on up. And when we came back to the U.S., we realized that really we needed that break too. And I think sometimes, especially when you're doing something so intense, just to avoid the burnout, you do need to take breaks. You need to have some refilling time.
Yeah. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just reaching for analogies here to try to understand it, because most of us haven't experienced what you've experienced. We'll leave the CIA alone for right now and maybe just kind of go toward a military metaphor, because it seems like a lot of what you experience is very much like what we see soldiers experience who are deployed for long periods of time. Like, it's stressful. Mm-hmm. It's stressful being outside your comfort zone for so long without a break, right? So the military knows, all militaries around the world should know, like, you rotate soldiers away from the front, give them some R&R before deploying them again. Because you get scars. Yeah, you get scars out there. You go through stuff, and you need somebody to talk to, and you need downtime and all that. How long did you come back to the States to get that rest before going out again?
We were in the States for a year before we relaunched, and that was actually kind of a surprise. I told God, no, thank you. I don't really want to do that again. I don't think, because it was so intense. You squeeze your thoughts into someone else's way of thinking, into someone else's worldview. You squeeze your thoughts into another language. You are constantly, there is no interaction that you're not analyzing ever. It's just very, just a lot of analysis all the time. So a lot of brain work. And I was like, Lord, I just really don't have any more to give. I can't, I feel like the Lord kind of sat with me with that. And so did my husband, because, my husband, Joshua, he's like always ready to go, like always, anywhere. Yeah. He's just very motivated, like, let's go yesterday. But he also just kind of sat with me on that. And God, he gave us the healing that we needed and the reassurance we needed, and he provided a path forward. It was very clear. And by the time we left a year later, we all had peace about it, even the kids. And we were able to take what we learned the first time and apply it in the second time, and that's helped too.
Right. Well, let me ask you this: is it hard? Was it hard? I know you'd probably you'd come home to visit, while you were in India, but has your perception of America changed, or any Western country for that matter, after being out in the mission field? Like, you come back, are you one of these people who are like, you come back and you're like, oh, these Christians in America, in the West, like, they're just so spiritually lazy, they have so much, they never get out of their comfort zone. Like, you know what I mean? Like, do you have to fight against a little bit of bitterness there because of what you've gone through? I mean, because soldiers do, right? Soldiers do.
Right.
Is it true for missionaries as well?
I'm sure for some people, for me, we had this amazing prayer team that was supporting us in prayer the whole time that we were out. I think we had like 250 people, and we had met each of these people in their house. So we knew, I say sometimes that, like, sometimes it seems the bride of Christ is veiled. Her beauty doesn't really shine because maybe she's shy. So it's like you go to church and you see those people that are up front and you meet a few people, but you don't meet everybody. And because we went around asking for prayer support, we got to meet all these amazing people in their homes, just quietly going through super difficult stuff. Yeah, not the same as us, not foreign, not language, not linguistic, but they were also, cancer is outside people's comfort zone. That's a whole world of itself, a child dying, that's outside our comfort zone. And so, we all have our own struggles. And I actually appreciate that more, having been a missionary, because I've been able to be connected to so many people who've been praying for us. But as far as how the U.S. has changed, man, it's changed. I mean, it's every time we come back, it's like, where are we, It's changed, obviously, politically right now a lot. But also, something that I guess the thing that stuck out to us most when we would come home from India was the way that spiritualism is so prevalent, I guess you could say. Like, it used to be just a few TV shows and maybe a couple of games, but now it's like everything. We'd go to the store and there was we went to like some craft store, and they had a book about how to summon demons with your drawings, at a craft store. And it was like, what? Okay. So we're like, man, we thought we left that stuff in India, But anyway.
Is this like a new dragon craft store as opposed to Michael, the craft store? It's like
I'm not going to say
12.
names. Oh, right. Oh, I get it. Nice. Yeah, but we just saw a lot of that, and just how it's becoming more acceptable. Things have definitely changed a lot.
I have a friend who is American, actually served in the U.S. Army, and then when he left to go pastor in another country, and he says, I'm never coming back again. He's like, man, I go home and visit my family, and it's like, I don't recognize this place anymore. So you're not the first person to tell me that they've had that experience after being gone for quite a while. It's like a surreal place.
For sure. In some ways, we have risks where we are, but there are other risks in America. I mean, there are a lot of moral risks for kids, and I really appreciate the fact that Christian parents who are trying to live intentionally and raise their kids to know God, they're having to deal with a lot of stuff right now. There's a lot of moral stuff happening, and it's not quite caught up in a lot of countries. So some of those things we don't even deal with. My kids just don't even know. Sure.
I think that maybe we can make this point here, that when you're in India or somewhere, you're aware of the risks a little bit more, because it's strange. It's in a different language. It's whatever. You're aware of the differences. Here, like, if you grow up in the States as a Christian, you often just kind of don't see the threat, I guess, as clearly.
For sure.
It's
like
that
the
make
frog
sense?
being boiled.
I mean,
have you heard that analogy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you put a frog
Yeah.
in boiling water, he'll hop out. But if you slowly turn up the heat, he'll stay there until he cooks.
Right.
It's
Has
definitely
anybody
true.
ever actually tried that?
I would like to know that.
I really wonder.
How do people know that?
I mean,
how do people know that?
Right.
You know that statistic that like you eat however many spiders in your lifetime during your sleep. Who is?
Yes,
how does someone
that's
know
not-
that? Come on.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Somebody lied to me because they told me when you wake up and your mouth is dry, it's because spiders crawled in there and drank the water. And I believed that for years
You
until
poor
I just
thing.
sat down one day and I was like, that's not true. That can't be true. That's silly.
Can't be true. No. I don't think we swallow spiders either.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, come on, man. The spiders are smart. They don't leave their web that often. Like they just chill there. Why would they want to
Exactly.
crawl in your mouth?
And be swallowed.
Anyways, and be swallowed. Anyway, so but the frog boiling
The frog,
thing,
right.
that's probably, that may be true. I don't know. I'm not willing to experiment there, but maybe there's some French listeners who have had frog legs or something and can tell us how that goes down. But anyways, sure. So there's risks everywhere. And I think maybe that's something people don't appreciate as much. Like they think, oh, well, I just see, I hear these stories about the idols or the demon possession or, whatever in these other countries. And I can see how that could be a challenge, but they don't see the idols in their own culture as clearly. Let's just put
Yeah.
it that way. I can see how that could be a challenge. And so maybe,
For sure.
if I may be so bold, is to say maybe when you leave for a number of years to be a missionary somewhere else, when you come back, perhaps you have a better vision of where those idols are in your country of origin than maybe you did before, right?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I do. And I think that's, any time that you haven't been somewhere, you come in as sort of an outsider. That's one of these small sacrifices that we make is we kind of turn ourselves into these awkward outsiders when we go. And then when we come back, we're also awkward outsiders. I remember someone having to tell me what a selfie was, probably like 2 years after selfies were a thing. And I'm like, what's a selfie? And they look at me like, did you just get here
I'm
from
so sorry.
Mars? Or,
Yeah.
But certainly
Yeah.
when you're an outsider, you start evaluating differently. And
Yeah.
kind of with a fresh view of things.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have a place that you belong, or has every place become a foreign place to you?
I have a sign on our wall here. It says, "Home is wherever I'm with you." And it has pictures of our family and friends in all the places we've lived. And for me now, home is with people. That's where I feel at home. It's not a place. I can say, however, that I went back to India after a couple of years and I felt super at home there. Like maybe even more than I had felt in the US, because I just, we were really young when we went out. We were 25? So really our worldviews were still forming. We were really, really young and we really assimilated. So going back there, it feels very homey. I really understand how people think now, which is a big blessing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, wherever I'm with people that
Sure.
are family or friends.
That's fair. If somebody's listening right now and they're thinking, God may be calling me to be a missionary, what kind of advice would you have for them?
I have a couple pieces of advice that I give to new missionaries. One of those is we spend a lot of time thinking about strategy. And we feel like, okay, if we can just figure out the right strategy, if we can learn the language, if we can learn the culture, if we can bond, or whatever the thing is that you're trying to do, then people will come to Jesus. They'll believe in God. And I would say the only strategy that really works is to get out of the way and let God do something. To make sure every day that you take that time to make sure that you are connected to him. And then when he tells you to do something, do it. And after time, you're going to see, okay, wait, he's doing something. He's doing something. And you're going to realize that you're just this teeny little piece of a bigger plan that God has. That's something that can give you peace when you feel that sense of overwhelm, because you are a drop in the bucket and what you're doing is a drop in the bucket. But you serve a God that, he parted the Red Sea. You serve a God that does impossible things. And yeah, it's impossible to reach the unreached, but he's good at impossible things. And then the second thing is just to be okay with who you are and who those in your family are. I mentioned like my husband is super driven and I'm a little bit more introverted. And I think at first when we launched, we both kind of thought I needed to be more like him. Like, let's get out there and do this, But over time, we realized that there's a reason why God created people different. And someone that he's going to reach is going to be a different person than the person I can reach. And so to just value yourself and value your contribution, but also to keep submitting your weaknesses to God, because there are going to be times when it feels like things are so far outside your comfort zone that you can't do it and still be you. But just pray about those things, because sometimes God wants to take you further than you think you can go. But yeah, to just value yourself because God values you, and to value those you're with, even though they're different.
Well, I'd encourage everybody, get out and read Hidden Song of the Himalayas. Abigail, where can they get this book from?
You can find it on Amazon.
There we go. You all know where that is. Anyways, I really enjoyed this book. I really didn't know what to expect when I found it. I didn't know if it was going to be really preachy, like this is what we believe and here's how I told these people what we believe, and kind of more theological. I didn't know if it would be more of a memoir or what. I had no idea what to expect, but I really enjoyed it. I only wish you'd make an audiobook so I would know how to pronounce some of these words.
Well, that's in the works, so hopefully we'll answer that need soon.
Great. Guys, this is a really I'm giddy because this is a really important moment. You realize you at home are listening, or at home in the car, wherever it is you're listening from. You're listening to a real life missionary, and she's writing stories of her mission work. And someday, some Adventist History podcaster is going to read this book and others like it and tell the story of Adventist missions in 2021. And so you're listening to history being made, Adventist history being made. And I have nothing but respect for you, Abigail, and your husband and your kids, and everything that you're trying to accomplish out there and following God's call. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today and talk with the listeners of the Adventist History Podcast. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.